Good morning to you all, and thank you for being with us today to discuss the IA detailed energy consumption data. I am Sonia Garcia, working in the team responsible for energy end uses and demand data and efficiency indicators built with the relevant activity data. Here's the agenda. We'll begin by understanding the demand side of the energy system and why it's essential to go on beyond the sectoral level to focus on detailed end-use data. Then we'll discuss how to classify end uses and fuels and how to collect data across sectors. And finally, we'll provide an overview of IA tools for data collection, including our energy end uses and efficiency indicators database, and we'll conclude with final remarks. Please feel free to ask any questions either today or via email. Let's start with the understanding of demand data within the framework of an energy balance. As you may know, a country's detailed consumption data can be presented in an energy balance, a matrix that displays flows and products and that is divided into three sections: supply, transformation, and final consumption. In the columns, we have the sources of energy, and in the rows, we have the origins and uses. Only in an energy balance, you can compare products since they are all reported within the same energy unit, and this format allows the easy comparison of the contribution each fuel makes to the economy and the relationships through the conversion of one fuel into another. Here, in energy demand and end-use data, we focus only on demand side, which looks at the second and the third block of this matrix. The second block counts the transformation of primary fuels to secondary commodities and own use of the energy sector. And the third block of total final consumption section shows all the different sectors consuming energy, including industry, transport, other sectors, and non-energy use. To truly understand energy consumption, we need to examine the details of how energy is used at the output level and how we consume energy across different sectors. Another way to present an energy balance is through the following chart, the Sankey chart, which is exactly the reverse matrix compared to the previous tabular layout, with the products in the horizontal dimension and flows in the vertical one. Visually, it's very interesting because the arrows shows the energy flows from production or imports to the transformation in the middles and to the final consumption in the very right. And here again, we only focus on demand side. But why do we need to look at the demand side of the energy system beyond the sectoral level? Energy consumption feeds four main sectors with different needs. Here at the IES Energy Data Center, we categorize energy consumption into four main sectors. Industry, which includes manufacturing and other industries like agriculture, mining, or construction. Services, residential, and transport. In the IA countries, transport is the most consuming sector, with more than 1/3 of the consumption. But the remaining sectors contribute with a significant percentage to the total final energy consumption. For example, industry represents a 24%, and residentials and services buildings represent about 20% and 15% respectively. So as you can see, no sector can be left behind. They all weigh a significant part of the system. We may wonder though, what are the underlying details of this consumption? Or which parts of the economy is the most sensitive to price or even to energy supply disruptions? Or which subsectors are efficient and which ones need help to improve? We'll answer all these questions, but first, let me start why it's important. Demand side data are the pillars of modeling and policy activities. The availability of detailed demand data enables bottom-up modeling work and a robust assessment of clean energy transitions and a carbon neutral world by 2050. Particularly, closing those data enables the tracking of energy efficiency improvements in the country and can be used for assessing, setting, and monitoring policy targets. Also, end-use data are devices to develop efficiency indicators. Generally, energy efficiency indicators are intensities presented as a ratio between the energy consumption, which is measured in energy units, and activity data, which is measured in physical units. For example, we can compute some indicators like space cooling energy consumption per dwelling, or total services energy consumption per capita, or cars energy consumption or energy intensity per passenger kilometers that give us important information. These indicators provide valuable insights into energy efficiency, consumption patterns, but also sector-specific trends, and its selection depends on the specific type of information we aim to extract. In the IA, we use the following pyramid, which is our methodology. The top of the pyramid shows very aggregated indicators, such as the energy intensity of the whole economy, which is an interesting project to compare the trend of various countries, for instance, but doesn't give many insights for policy decisions. The farther down one goes, the more data one needs. With subsectoral and end-use data, along with the related activity data, for instance, tons of good produce or number of square meters of house heated, one can identify the focus point for improvements, whether through investment, technological improvements or upgrades, or social measures. But how can we classify end uses and how can we classify fuels? First, as we saw in the energy balance, in the first section, the third block of the matrix shows the total final consumption of a country. This total consumption is divided by sectors, which can be divided into end uses or subsectors. I will dig now into the details later. Beginning with industry, here for Mexico and Poland, we can see the 6 most consuming subsectors. Each of them uses different fuels with general trends and country specificities. Chemicals often depends on gas, for example, but while wood and paper may use significant amounts of biofuels and waste, or basic metals may rely on fossil fuel or on electricity, depending on the technological choices. For all this, tracking these splits allows to anticipate the impact of policies and regulations, and is also essential for energy security analysis, especially for subsectors depending mostly on one energy product. For this reason, we collect energy consumption data by subsector, such as, for example, basic metals with ferrous and non-ferrous metals, paper, pulp, and printing industry, the chemical and pharmaceutical products, non-metallic minerals such as cement or clinker, textiles and leather, the food and tobacco industry subsector, the rubbers and plastics, and so on and so forth. But also, we collect corresponding activity data, such as value added, which is the contribution of a specific industry or sector to the whole economy, and the fiscal output, which is the actual quantity of goods produced by an industry. With this data, we can compute some indicators, such as an energy intensity for one specific subsector per value added, which is good to compare sectors, countries, or follow trends. But we also can collect energy consumption per fiscal output, for instance, per ton of cement, which can be helpful to avoid currency issues and excellent at plant level or to track technology deployment. Let's jump now to the residential sector. Fuel split by end uses gives crucial insights on our standard of living, and we can see the influence of the climate. For instance, residential energy consumption in Finland on the left and in Morocco on the right shows significant difference. In Morocco, space heating accounts for a minimal portion of the residential energy use, whereas in Finland, it, along with residential appliances, dominates consumption. Additionally, the share and the type of fuel used for cooking vary significantly based on lifestyle factors such as the habits of eating out, cooking methods, and types of stoves. For this reason, the fuel split of most consuming end uses are central to understand the reliance on imports, the impact of prices variations, the design of emissions, and efficiency programs and health-related issues such as indoor pollution. As for industry, for the residential sector, we do collect energy consumption, but not divided by subsectors. We collect data divided by end use, such as, for example, space heating and cooling, water heating, cooking, lighting, and residential appliances such as refrigerators, freezers, TVs, computers, and so on. Also, we collect the corresponding activity data for this sector, which could be population, number of occupied dwellings, the residential floor area, or appliances stock and diffusion, which is the total number of household appliances and how common they are across the population. As for industry, we can compute indicators like, for example, overall space heating, energy consumption per dwelling, per floor area, or per capita. which will help us to evaluate heating efficiency and analyze behavioral patterns and demographic influence on energy consumption. Now, if we jump to the services sector, we usually categorize services activity into 11 subsectors. For instance, in this example for Switzerland in 2022, half of the energy consumption is covered by only 3 subsectors: wholesale and retail trade, accommodation and food, and administrative services. But the weight of each subsector in energy terms might not relate to its output expressed with value added. For instance, accommodation and food services provide little wealth but consume 20% of the services energy. The energy efficiency indicators, here in megajoules per USD, shows that wholesale and retail have a significantly lower intensity than accommodation and food services, because the ratio of energy consumption and value added is smaller than the accommodation and food subsector. Apart from the energy data by subsector here for the services sector, we have started to collect also energy use coming from data centers. And as for the residential sector, we do collect building end uses such as space heating, space cooling, lighting, but also other building energy use and non-building energy use. We also collect the corresponding activity data, such as value added, as for industry, as explained before, but also services floor area and number of employees. Finally, for the transport sector, splitting it already simply into 4 main modes, we have here the data for the IA countries. Road, which takes up 90% of the consumption, but also rail, air, and water transport represents the percentage of the whole sector. Then by fuel, we see that the oil products account for the overwhelming majority of the consumption, which is at 96%. And even within the oil products, two, namely gasoline and diesel, represent a huge part. But what about the split between passenger and freight? That is, how much is consumed by cars and trucks? For example, the share of passenger cars in Korea is around 50%, but the share of freight trucks here is almost 80%. Activity shared by modes vary significantly from one country to another. So looking at activity data can help us to explain variations in energy consumption patterns, efficiency, driving habits, and car usage. That's why here we collect also energy consumption data, which can be split by 2 segments, which are passenger and freight, as well as by mode, which can be road, rail, air, and water. In the passenger segment, the passenger transport can be split further by vehicle type, for instance, between passenger cars, buses, and motorcycles, but also domestic passenger airplanes and ships. And the freight transport can be split by trucks, trains, airplanes, and ships. The needed activity data encompasses mainly different kind of data, such as vehicle stocks and distance traveled by vehicles, which we merge into BKM, which is the vehicle kilometers, and vehicle loads, which is computed into PKM, which is the passenger kilometer, and TKM, which is the ton kilometer. And to end up this section of the data collection divided by sector, we can also perform the compositions analysis once the picture is complete and once we have all the data. For example, for the transport sector, that means data for each segment across all modes and ideally all vehicle types. For example, for road transport, cars versus buses at least, with again very careful methodological alignment. This decompositions analysis disentangles activity, structure, and efficiency. If activity is the amount of goods or number of passengers and distance traveled, the structure is the modal shift, for example, changing from cars to bus or trains or to the public sector, to the public transport, and efficiency, which is the load factor, engine efficiency, and driving behavior. In this slide here, in the passenger segment on the left, efficiency gains have compensated for increased activity overall, leading to a stable consumption. And on the freight side, on the right, efficiency deteriorated, probably through lower load factors to accommodate with more stringent deadlines, for instance. So now, how to collect detailed data for each sector? In general, data collections can be categorized into four main methods: administrative sources, surveys, measuring, and modeling. Administrative sources are often the pre-existing basis which needs to be gathered, and the issues here are often to do with institutional arrangements and methodological alignment. Surveys here are the ones that the data are extracted from this or user or source. Use surveys are sometimes costly but very effective, and a representative sample is key. Measuring, which cover limited uses but get robust data, is powerful once in place but needs dedicated equipment and careful use. And finally, modeling, which requires some solid data to be built on and expertise, but allows to bridge gaps and transform, for instance, car sales into car stock. These four main methods can be combined, but it's important to always check what data exists already in other institutions to see what we have and in order to extract double information. If we go for some examples very quickly, for commercial activities, that is in the industry and services, a great basis of information can be found through economic authorities, such as a Chamber of Commerce, regulations authorities, or tax reports. Buildings are often requiring the most varied data sources, whether residential buildings or services from an use point of view. With basic activity data, such as population, employment, and so on, most energy consumption data relies on a combination of surveys and measuring in base cases. And finally, in the transport sector, many data exists from oil consumption to car sales or registrations, but this needs some manipulations, if not modeling, to obtain data split by modes and by vehicle types. Now, let's have a quick tour in the IA tools regarding how to collect data, as this is not a simple task, as you may know. First, we have an experience database to foster dialogue with other countries. The truth is that other countries' experiences are incredible, valuable resources when one needs to collect new data. And that's why the IA gather online numerous data collection practices, along with some documentation from many countries around the world, covering a huge diversity of situations. You will for sure find some insights by browsing these tools, and we can put you in contact with the institution in charge of these data collections if needed. In addition, we maintain documentation with methodology and detailed country notes, as well as two manuals on statistics and policy making. And to complement and strengthen this framework, the IEA recently developed two guides to build national roadmaps. One called Designing an Energy Statistics Roadmap, which is based on energy statistics in general, and the second one, shown here in the slide, focus on the demand side. This second one, it aims first helping at countries locating their departure point and to identify the targets according to national interests and priorities. And finally, we are currently finalizing a toolkit to estimate disaggregated data to be published very soon. The idea is to provide a simple adaptive tool to model and use data from more commonly available data. So feel free to reach out to us for any of these resources. Ultimately, the IE's data collection on energy consumption is reflected in our energy and use and efficiency database, which was decided in the 2009 governing board meeting and ministerial level. So end-use data and statistics needs to be collected annually to develop and track consumption patterns and energy efficiency indicators. And that is why the IA developed a questionnaire template based on a robust harmonized methodology. This is very detailed questionnaire and database, covers 31 member countries, plus countries association and beyond the IA family, which is almost 2 billion people. From all this data collected, the IA Energy Data Center compiles a large database available on our web page and a data explorer with a web interface to produce graphs and browse our data, as you can see in the slide. And here you have the link in case you want to dig in. Bring it all together, here's the main takeaways from this presentation. Energy demand and end-use data is essential because, first, it enhances policy effectiveness and decision-making. Policymakers can tailor energy policies to specific end uses, set realistic targets, and track the impact of efficiency regulations at the subsectoral level. Also, second, it improves the accuracy of energy model and forecasting, which is essential for bottom-up analysis, supporting precise demand projections, scenario assessments, and infrastructure planning, and enables effective monitoring of energy transition progress, providing concrete indicators to assess whether clean energy transitions are progressively effective in each subsector. And finally, to very end, as we wish to include as many countries as possible, we are always working bilaterally with multiple institutions to make this database as representative and complete as possible, the one that I presented before. So we welcome any question on international methodologies or any experience on data collections from any country. Recall that pretty much no country has data about everything, but very often data is first collected and on the most very important sector, and then it expands. So if you are interested in collaborating with us, feel free to reach out via email. We are always happy to work together to improve energy demand and end-use data collection and practices. And so, yeah, thank you so much for your attention.